At my ex's baby shower, his new girlfriend stood up in front of everyone, smiling with her hand on her belly, and said, "He told me he never loved his first family. They were just a mistake." People laughed. I watched his friends and relatives chuckle like it was some inside joke. My son Micah stared at his plate, his cheeks flushed red. My daughter Lena squeezed my hand under the table and whispered, "Why are they laughing at us?" I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I didn't even stand up. I just reached into my purse, pulled out a small black velvet box, walked over to the woman holding court in the center of the room and said, "He wanted you to have this." She looked confused, smiled like it was some kind of prank. Then she opened the box, and within seconds, her face changed. The smile disappeared. Her hands began to shake. And just like that, in the middle of her baby shower, she started crying so hard she couldn't speak. Inside the box was a letter he wrote me, a letter he wrote just 1 week before she got pregnant. The baby shower invitation came in the mail on a quiet Thursday afternoon, a blush pink envelope with gold lettering that read, "You're invited. Celebrate Jackson and Ariel's new beginning." I stood in the kitchen, still holding a dish towel in one hand and the unopened envelope in the other. The sunlight from the window felt harsh. My stomach sank before I even read the details. I hadn't spoken to Jackson in almost 6 months, not since he called to say he was happy now and that he hoped I was moving on too. Before that, our conversations were short and awkward, mostly about visitation for the kids or missed birthdays. He used to be the man who kissed my forehead every night before bed and brought me coffee in the mornings. Now he was someone I didn't recognize. Building a new life with someone else like our 10 years together never happened. I tossed the envelope on the counter and tried to forget it. But the next morning, Micah found it while reaching for cereal. He picked it up, reading it slowly, then looked at me. "Are we going?" he asked. Lena was sitting at the table, her legs swinging under her chair, pretending not to listen, but I could tell she was waiting for my answer too. I paused, thinking of 100 reasons to say no. Then I nodded. "Yeah," I said, "we're going." It wasn't pride. It wasn't even about closure. I think deep down, I needed them to see for themselves what kind of man their father really was. I wanted them to stop asking me why he didn't call back or why he missed school plays. I also didn't want them to carry around the idea that maybe it was their fault. A few days later, I sat on my bed staring at a small black velvet box. Inside was a letter Jackson wrote to me nearly 2 years after we split, just before Ariel's pregnancy was announced. I had never told anyone about it, not even my Aunt Naomi, who helped me get back on my feet after the breakup. He had slipped it under my door one night after dropping off the kids. In it, he said things I hadn't let myself think about since the day he walked out. "You'll always be my safe place. I still dream about you." I don't know why I left. Sometimes I think I ran because I was scared of what we had. I miss your laugh. I miss how our daughter hugs me like she's trying to keep me from disappearing. I wish I could fix what I broke. I kept the letter because I wasn't ready to believe it was just another lie. But I never responded, and I never showed it to the kids. I thought if I stayed quiet long enough, the hurt would stop echoing in the walls of our home. On the morning of the shower, I wore a simple blue dress and tied Lena's hair in 2 braids. Micah wore the new button-up shirt he picked out with Naomi. He was proud of it. He looked older in it, almost like he was trying to prove something. They were excited but nervous, especially Lena. She asked if Ariel would like her. I told her to just be herself. We arrived 15 minutes early. The decorations were beautiful, soft pastels and delicate signs saying, "Welcome, little one." The guests smiled politely when we walked in, but no one came over. We weren't offered drinks. No one asked if we needed seats. We found a table in the back near the dessert trays and sat quietly. Jackson didn't even acknowledge us right away. He was too busy holding Ariel's hand and greeting her family. Aunt Naomi had warned me not to go. The night before, she said, "You don't need to prove anything to anyone, Kayla. Let them have their moment. You already raised your babies with grace." But I needed to be there. I needed my kids to hear whatever version of the truth their father was going to tell in front of his new life. So we waited, watched the room fill up with laughter and games and tiny gifts. I looked at my children, so small in those chairs, so brave for being there. I felt the letter in my purse like a heartbeat. I didn't go to start a fight. I went to remember who I was, and I went so my children would never again feel like someone else's mistake. The music got louder. A host with a clipboard called for everyone to gather around the main table. There were cupcakes arranged in the shape of a teddy bear, pink punch in tall glasses, and a long banner behind Jackson and Ariel that read, "A New Beginning." People clapped, whistled, and cheered as the couple made their way to the center. Jackson had his hand on Ariel's back like he was guiding her into a spotlight. She glowed. He looked comfortable, proud, like a man who had finally figured himself out. I kept glancing at my kids. Micah had stopped smiling. He was tracing shapes on the tablecloth with his finger, his shoulders hunched forward. Lena had her chin in her hands, watching the crowd. Every so often she looked up at me, waiting for a sign that we could leave. We stayed quiet through the diaper games and the gift opening. No one acknowledged our table, even when Jackson unwrapped the present the kids had picked out. A soft white baby blanket Lena insisted on because it reminded her of the one she had as a baby. He opened it, smiled politely, and moved on without saying a word to us. Then someone handed Ariel a microphone. She stood beside Jackson, her hand resting on her belly, and smiled at the crowd. "I just want to say thank you," she began, "to everyone who's shown us love and support. We are so lucky to be surrounded by people who understand what it means to build something real." There were nods and claps. I felt my chest tighten. I could already feel it coming, like a shift in the wind before a storm. She looked at Jackson, then back at the guests. "Some of you know Jackson's story," she continued, "how he tried to make something work that was never meant to last. He stayed with the wrong person because he thought it was the right thing to do." My mouth went dry. He told me once that he never truly loved his first family, that they were just a mistake, a chapter he should have ended earlier. Someone in the crowd laughed. It wasn't cruel, just casual. A woman in the front smiled and shook her head like she was remembering something silly. I didn't move. Micah's hand froze on the table. He blinked, then looked at me. Lena stared straight ahead, her face blank. "He said he only knew what real love felt like when he met me," Ariel went on, "and now he finally gets to do it right." The room clapped. Someone yelled, "Amen to that!" I sat there with my spine straight and my jaw clenched. I wanted to scream, not for me, but for my kids, for the way Micah's shoulders had dropped and how Lena's bottom lip was trembling, for every bedtime story I had read to them while Jackson was out finding himself, for every holiday I had to fake a smile so they wouldn't feel the hole he left behind. I glanced at Jackson. He wasn't looking at us. He clapped like everyone else, a proud man standing next to his new beginning. In that moment, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Not heartbreak, not anger, clarity. This wasn't just about a man who left. This was about my children sitting in silence while a room full of adults laughed at their existence. It was about a father who was too much of a coward to look his own kids in the eye while someone else erased them from his story. I reached into my purse and felt the small box. I hadn't planned on using it. I brought it because it reminded me of who he really was, not the version he played for other people. But now, watching my son blink away tears and my daughter trying not to cry in public, I knew what I had to do. This wasn't about revenge. This was about the truth he had buried, and the truth she had no idea was sitting in that box. I stood up, not quickly, not angrily, just calmly, like I was walking toward something that had been waiting for me. People turned their heads, some quieted. Ariel was still talking, still smiling, but she stopped when I reached her. I held out the box and said the only words I needed to say. "He wanted you to have this." She took the box from my hand like she thought it was a joke. Her smile didn't fade at first. She looked at me, then at Jackson, like this was just another part of the show. I didn't say anything else. I turned and walked back to the table where Micah and Lena were still sitting, trying to disappear into their chairs. Ariel glanced around and gave a little laugh, trying to brush it off. She held the box in her palm, turning it over. It was small, covered in worn black velvet with a tiny gold clasp. I had kept it in my dresser drawer for almost 2 years, buried beneath jewelry I never wore anymore. I used to think that if I ever opened it again, I'd fall apart. But when I pulled it out the night before the shower, I didn't cry. I just read the letter once, folded it carefully, and tucked it back inside. Jackson stepped closer to Ariel, probably trying to wave it off to change the subject or steer the attention back to the gifts. But she opened the box before he could stop her. She pulled out the letter with her fingers, slow and deliberate. The room started to quiet down. Laughter softened. Someone turned the music lower. Ariel unfolded the paper and looked at it. I could tell the moment her eyes hit the words. She blinked, then read faster, her smile dropping without her realizing it. I had memorized every word of that letter. I didn't need to see it to know what it said. Kayla, I keep trying to tell myself you're better off without me, that I made the right choice walking away, but I don't sleep anymore. I hear Lena calling for me when I'm not there. I see Micah's drawings and wonder what they'd look like if I stayed. You were always patient, even when I didn't deserve it. I don't know how to ask for forgiveness. I don't even know what I want anymore. I just know I miss you. I miss all of it. I think I ran because loving you scared me. But losing you scares me more. I hadn't written back. I never even told him I read it. A week after that letter showed up, he posted a photo of Ariel on his social media with the caption, "Starting over, starting fresh." 2 weeks later, she announced the pregnancy. I didn't send the letter back. I didn't burn it. I just waited. Maybe not on purpose. Maybe I just wasn't ready to let it go. Until now, Ariel's hands were shaking. Her face went pale. She looked at Jackson, then back at the letter. She read something under her breath. I couldn't hear the words, but I saw her lips move. Her eyes were wet. She pressed the letter against her chest like she was trying to hide it, like she didn't want anyone else to see what she had just read. Jackson reached for the paper, but she stepped back. "You wrote this?" she asked him, her voice louder than she intended. He looked like a kid caught in a lie. His mouth opened, but nothing came out. He tried to laugh it off. That was a long time ago. It didn't mean anything. Her voice cracked. "You said you never loved her. You said it was just duty, that she manipulated you with the kids." He said nothing. She looked around the room like it was finally dawning on her that this wasn't a celebration anymore. People had stopped clapping. Conversations faded. Plates were left half-eaten. Everyone was watching now. Everyone heard her. Everyone saw him. I stayed quiet. I didn't need to add anything. The letter spoke for itself. His words, not mine. Micah tugged on my sleeve. "Can we go?" I nodded. I reached for Lena's hand and stood. We walked toward the door while Ariel stood frozen in the center of the room, holding the proof that everything she believed about Jackson was just a carefully crafted lie. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. The truth was already open, and it had done what truth always does. It changed everything. We were halfway to the door when I heard Ariel's voice again. "I believed you," she said. I stopped walking. Not because I was going to turn around, but because I needed to hear this part. For once, I needed to know what it sounded like when someone else stood in the truth I had lived with for years. "You told me I was different. You said she clung to you, that you stayed because of the kids, because you felt sorry for her," Ariel said. Her voice wasn't raised, but it was sharp and trembling. "But this letter says you loved her, that you never got over her, that you ran away from her." I turned slightly, just enough to see Jackson's shoulders tense and his jaw tighten. He didn't yell. He didn't apologize. He just looked like he had been caught in the middle of his own lie and had nowhere to run. Ariel's eyes welled up again, and this time she didn't try to stop it. Her face crumpled. The letter, now soft and creased from her grip, hung loosely in her hand. She looked at the people still sitting around the room and shook her head. "You all laughed," she said, her voice breaking. "You laughed when I said his first family was a mistake. His children were sitting right there." The silence was louder than the music ever was. No one had anything to say. Not Jackson's brother, not his cousins, not the friend who earlier clapped at the idea of a new beginning. They just stared. No one moved. Jackson finally spoke. "It was complicated. You don't understand." Ariel shot him a look. "I understand perfectly. You lied. You built this whole relationship on the idea that she never mattered, that her kids didn't matter. You made me think I was your first real love, that this baby was your first real family, but that's not what this letter says." She held it up in the air for a second, then let it fall to the table. "You could have just told the truth," she said. "You could have told me you weren't over her. I would have made a different choice." Jackson ran a hand down his face and looked around as if searching for an exit. His polished image was gone. The confident host was now just a man whose story had fallen apart in front of the very people he tried to impress. I took a step toward Micah and Lena. Neither of them said a word. They were watching, listening, processing. I knelt next to them. "You okay?" I asked. Micah nodded slowly. Lena leaned her head against my shoulder. "Can we just go home?" she whispered. "Yeah," I said. "We're done here." As we turned to leave, I heard Ariel again, softer this time. "Kayla." I looked back. Her face was flushed, streaked with tears. She wasn't holding the microphone anymore, just standing there, empty-handed, lost in a room she no longer recognized. "I didn't know," she said. "I'm sorry." I gave a small nod. "I know." That was all. No need for a speech. No need to hold on to anything else. What needed to be said had already been written, already been read. We walked outside into the early afternoon sun. It was warm, quiet, nothing like the tension still hanging in that pastel-decorated room behind us. I opened the car door for Lena. Micah climbed in beside her. I looked at both of them, my heart heavy and full at the same time. That letter didn't undo the hurt. It didn't fix what Jackson broke. But it exposed the truth. Not for revenge, not for drama, but for the sake of my children who had sat through so many moments of being treated like an afterthought. Now they had seen for themselves. No more lies, no more pretending. We drove home in silence, not because we were sad, but because something had settled. A weight had shifted. My kids didn't need to ask why he didn't come around more often. They didn't need to wonder if they were loved less. They had seen the truth, and so had everyone else. When we got home, the house felt different. It wasn't cleaner or quieter than usual, but it felt like the air inside had shifted. Something heavy had been pulled out, and now the space left behind made room for something lighter. Not peace exactly, but clarity. Micah headed straight to his room without saying a word. He wasn't angry. He wasn't sad. He just needed to be alone for a while. Lena stayed close to me. She curled up on the couch with her teddy bear and laid her head on my lap. I ran my fingers through her hair while she stared at the television without really watching it. Aunt Naomi came by later that evening. She brought 2 slices of chocolate cake wrapped in foil and a quiet kind of support that didn't need words. She set the cake down, gave me a long look, and said, "You did what needed to be done." I nodded. I didn't feel victorious. I didn't feel like I had gotten even. I just felt finished. Something that had been open and aching for years had finally closed. Later, Micah came downstairs and stood in the doorway. His voice was quiet. Was it true? What she said? About him never loving us? I stood and walked over to him. I crouched down to his eye level and put my hand on his shoulder. "No," I said. "That's not true. But your dad doesn't know how to love the way you deserve, and that's not your fault." He looked down, fidgeting with the hem of his sleeve. He didn't even say anything. "I know," I said. "But what she read in that letter, that was real, and it had nothing to do with who you are or how good you've been. Some people just don't know how to show up even when they want to." He didn't say anything else, but he nodded. Then he hugged me. Not quickly or out of habit, but tightly, like he needed to hold on to something that felt safe. I wrapped my arms around him and held him until he pulled away. That night, after the kids went to bed, I sat at the kitchen table and opened the letter again. I hadn't planned to keep it. I thought maybe I would tear it up or throw it away now that it had done its job, but I didn't. I read it one last time. The words didn't hurt anymore. They didn't carry the same weight. What once felt like a wound now just felt like a memory, a reminder of a version of myself I had outgrown. I folded it, placed it back in the box, and put it in the top drawer of the hall cabinet, behind the emergency flashlight and old batteries. Not because I needed it, but because someday Lena might ask. Someday Micah might want to read it for himself. And I'll let them. Not to shame their father, not to reopen old pain, but to remind them that love isn't always clean or consistent, and that sometimes the truth arrives late. But it still matters. In the days that followed, I didn't hear from Jackson. No apology, no explanation. He stayed silent. Maybe he thought it was better that way. Maybe he didn't have the courage to face the aftermath of his choices. Either way, I no longer waited for him to do the right thing. I stopped needing anything from him the moment my kids looked at me and saw that I had never stopped showing up. Ariel unfollowed me on social media. I heard from someone that she moved back in with her sister temporarily. I don't know what became of her and Jackson after that. I don't need to know, because what I took away from that day had nothing to do with revenge. It was about the power of silence, the strength in restraint, the dignity in truth. And it was about my kids, sitting in that room surrounded by people who dismissed them and realizing they were not the mistake. They were the only real thing he ever had, and the one thing he never deserved to keep. I may not have planned to speak, but in the end I said everything that needed to be said, without raising my voice, without fighting, and without breaking down. That's how you protect your children. That's how you heal. If you've made it to the end of this story, thank you for listening. This wasn't about revenge. It was about standing in the truth when it mattered most. If you've ever felt erased, overlooked, or made to feel like your love was disposable, know this: your story matters, and your voice is powerful. If this video spoke to you, please like it so more people can find it. Share it with someone who needs to be reminded that quiet strength is still strength. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever had a moment where the truth finally came to light? Let's talk about it below. And if you want more real stories that hit hard and heal deep, subscribe to the channel and hit the bell so you never miss the next one. Until next time, stay grounded, stay kind, and never let someone else define your worth.